My name's Matt Bateson. I'm a principal consultant with Fox IT, and today we're really going to be looking at the evolution of service management. But really, for those of you who aren't aware of the cloud or know that it's about to take over the whole universe, but really what we're going to be talking about today is the implications the cloud has on things like service management and how we manage that cloud-based environment. We have an expert panel to my left, and we have a technical expert to my right. On the far of my left and your right, we have Vernon Lloyd, ITIL author. We also have David Percy, who's a professional services director from VMware. So David has to make the technology work on the ground. And we have Matt, who's going to be driving a technical demo for us. So before we start in a technical demo, David, can you just give us a quick overview of what is zero-touch automation?
The thing we're going to try and show today is the way that we can accelerate the delivery of infrastructure. So really it's about the classics doing more with less. Instead of going through a lot of the rigor of an old-fashioned process which had a lot of people touching it along the way, really it's moving the process forward more quickly and getting it out in the most efficient way possible.
So from a service management perspective, why is it important that we allow our application development community to be able to engage with IT via the catalogue and procure their own servers or application systems? Why is that important?
So the reality is this is going to happen. Lots of people are talking about cloud. Lots of people are saying all of these new technologies are going to be available to us. The IT community within an organization will demand these things. They're not settling with putting in a request and waiting 6 weeks for their server to arrive. They want it this afternoon. And if they don't get it, they'll go somewhere else. So IT doesn't have a monopoly on any of this anymore. They're going to go to Amazon Web Services, they're going to go to the providers and just stick in their credit card details and get this kind of equipment themselves. So IT needs to keep up with the pace.
Okay, so if we don't do it in the IT department or as the IT provider, then the consumers are going to go somewhere else, right?
Exactly.
We're kind of provisioning a server here, right? So it's out there, it's in the cloud. But hang on, we probably just skipped the change approval board, if you like, the CAB, as we would know it in ITIL terminology. So Vernon, can you just quickly give us a quick, what's your view, really, on is that risky, is that okay?
Yeah, there is a risk, of course. The risk is that we deploy things we don't actually need. Just because we can do something, and we can do it efficiently and effectively like we're seeing here, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do it. We have to make sure there is a need. We have good governance in place to ensure that this is a requirement of the business and we've got a business case for doing it. So we need to speed that whole process up. Yes, absolutely, but we still need standard changes to be able to implement these things, as I said, as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
So the 2 points I think I heard there were, first of all, we're talking about standard changes, so we're still talking about change management in this environment, still very relevant. But then we're talking about post-change governance. So we need to be thinking about what we're doing maybe a bit more reactively, so we're enabling the speed and agility that the business and the consumers require, right? Once we've provisioned it and it's there in our environment and it's running and they're happy with the service, how does IT then manage that? We're talking about cloud here, right? So this is being provisioned in a cloud. Can we then move that around?
What we're doing right now is we're provisioning this in the private cloud of this organization. And that's usually the default option for most people. But what will happen over time is that perhaps there'll be a big project going on and you need to kind of accelerate and to burst into perhaps a hybrid cloud without any involvement or knowledge of the end user. So the fundamental architecture of our cloud infrastructure is based on things that can move between private and public cloud without any impact to the business.
And in some cases things move around without us asking them to move because we've set up policies that allow certain applications to roam around between different environments or zones.
Yeah, again, we're coming back to being more efficient. The technology is going to manage where it needs to be. So bursting out into hybrid cloud is a function of the technology and not of the people driving the process.
So just to understand this, we've got this infrastructure and our virtual applications are moving around, they've got a mind of their own, on their own accord, within certain controls that we've set using policies. So how do we know if there's an incident, for example, where that incident actually occurred? how do we keep control of this kind of stuff? I mean, how do you do configuration management if things are automatically moving around all the time?
Configuration management in the cloud, I think, is going to be different from a traditional place that we've come from. I think there's a lot of people thinking carefully about how this is going to be modelled in a configuration management system. But as I said before, we still need to have controls in place, of course. We do need to understand exactly what we're utilising, the breakdown level within our configuration management system, the components we're identifying will be different.
How do you know what's enough control?
Yeah.
How do you know what's not too much? Because you don't want to have too much control that you stop certain things from happening, otherwise you consumers are going to go elsewhere again.
We see people doing this right now. And the thing that happens because of human nature is all these guys are requesting infrastructure more than they need. So someone might need a server for 2 weeks with, say, 2 gigs of RAM to do a bit of testing. They'll request one for a month with 4 gigs of RAM. So what you actually need in this scenario where you're allowing people to almost self-provision is you need more governance. You actually don't need less. We're not actually removing the need for governance. We're actually saying we should increase it, but we should make it more flexible.
I want to kind of move on to software as a service, maybe platform as a service, because they're slightly different in their nature. Where maybe the business are going direct to SaaS vendors, for those of you maybe aware of Salesforce and certain other SaaS products, generally the relationships between the business and the SaaS provider doesn't have IT involvement. It'll be direct from the sales director, for example, and Salesforce as the CRM provider. So if IT don't know about it, how are they meant to be responsible for compliance and governance, or should IT be involved in that decision?
I think IT should be involved. The business departments, the business units should come up with their requirements, and IT should provide the best solution to meet those requirements.
Our customers, the people who consume IT from us, are expecting more. So that doesn't absolve the need for IT to do things. It just means we've got to up our game.
And I assume if an application fails or a service fails, it's still going to be the service desk that gets the call, right? Or the email or the incident at some point. So I think what we're exploring here is that things like ITIL and COBIT, they're not just equally as important in the cloud environment. They're actually more important, and it's more important to have the right controls and the right processes in place that underpin what the consumer wants, because otherwise they're going to go elsewhere, but actually give you that control that you need as IT to provide the right level of service to the consumers. We're going to bring this back to what Fox IT are doing and Itsm 2.0, right? So we've kind of gone through where we're at with cloud and what it can do. We've talked about infrastructure services, we've talked a little bit about software services or software as a service, and kind of how IT still needs to maintain control of these things. We've also touched on some very specific points about ITIL and certain controls. I think we're all in agreement that they're all still completely relevant, but just slightly different. They have a different context. So service management does need to evolve. So we've kind of put this slide up to say, well, what does this evolution actually consist of? So just some of the key points is service providers and people that have traditionally been providing services will probably end up as service brokers. So they'll be brokering between different suppliers to give the consumers the best value for money, levels of security, availability, performance, all of those things that we know and love. Capacity management, so traditionally monitoring capacity usage and working out if the finance teams are going to need more capacity at year end, etc. We're going to just move to service elasticity. But service elasticity, we're just kind of focusing on, let's not need to plan and do all the proactive activity. Let's just let the service scale as it needs to, because it's been built into our design. And because it's been built into our design, we can then monitor it kind of reactively using some of our governance activities that we undertake. So given that we've explored ITIL and COBIT to a large respect as well in terms of processes and compliance, we know that all the principles that they talk about are still completely relevant. So we kind of dispel any messages that ITIL is dead or ITIL and the cloud don't mix. Actually they do. But it does need to be a slightly different context about how you do ITIL in the cloud environment, or how you use it to manage your infrastructure as your applications have no fixed abode. So we've actually created a framework that really looks at how you can use your existing best practice like ITIL and COBIT, etc., and map that onto what we have here as 5 organisational functions. These five areas of capability really focus on how you integrate those best practices in your organisation, but then the kind of the extra guidance for the cloud is then mapped onto process groups which are within this model. Now I can understand there's probably a lot to take on with this model. So we do have a website with all the content described on. It's completely free to access. Thank you very much for being here and listening to our launch event, and I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.